Flying in the UK is just like that dream we've all had about being back at school. It's exam time and you're about to take that test in the one subject you feel really confident in. You walk into the exam room feeling ready, you've done your preparation, read through your notes, done practice tests. You're fully expecting this to be an easy win, but then you turn over the exam paper and you see the challenge ahead of you. It's like everything's written in another language. You realise you can't just rely on your core experience. There's a lot more to this than your self-confidence ever imagined. And that is exactly how it felt for me flying in the UK. Yes, a few months ago I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to fly around some of the busiest airspace I've ever been in.
Gatwick's over to my right hand side. Don't fly into Gatwick, don't fly into Gatwick.
And even though I'd studied up on the UK procedures, I flew with an instructor beforehand.
This is the problem with deconfliction service. They have to now route us around every single ping. Then we don't want to be deconflicted.
And prepared myself as well as I could for the trip. Despite my underlying aviation experience, I actually found flying in the UK quite challenging at times. Now do know, I did say challenging, not better, not worse, it's not good, it's not bad. Every country is obviously entitled to run its aviation network however they want. I did just find the UK to be really interesting and pretty much unique in terms of anywhere else I've flown in the world. And of course, I'm just a private pilot. This is one person's experience. I'm not qualified to give instructional advice, so anything you see in this video, please check with a qualified instructor first. Now saying all that, let's start with what I probably noticed as the biggest difference, which are the levels of VFR services. Yes, that's right, plural. Levels, VFR basic service, VFR traffic service, VFR... I've got my notes. Even with my notes, I forgot what they are. There's too many of them. Okay, just been checking my notes the last couple of minutes. So yeah, in Australia we have VFR and IFR, and the level of air traffic control service that you have in either one of those depends on the class of airspace that you're flying through. In the UK though, there are different levels even if you're flying outside of controlled airspace. So like Class G, uncontrolled airspace, you can actually have up to 4 different levels of air traffic service in that uncontrolled airspace. I refer to my notes on this. You've got basic, traffic, procedural and deconfliction. Now I'm not going to try and explain the differences between those because Philippe from Echelon Air, who I flew with in the UK a couple of months ago, he did a much better job of it when we were flying from East Midlands Airport up to Scotland.
There's basically 4 types of services in the UK. You have your basic service, which is just like they know who you are, basically. You have your traffic service, where they give you traffic advisories, and any changes in altitude you have to let them know. You have the radar or procedural service, right, where they mandate you go to a specific point. Yep. Yeah, maybe it's when you're doing an approach, for example. Or we had a specific clearance through this Aberdeen zone. Yeah. Right? Our clearance was maintain flight level 100 on track WIC. You're cleared through the zone, procedural service. If we were to deviate at all from that left turn, right turn, we would have had to notify them. Okay. Under traffic service, we can turn left and right as we want. So we're now on the 4th level, which is the deconfliction. Yep. So the deconfliction, he's going to tell us to turn to avoid other aircraft and maintain our bubble. He'll move us. He'll say, okay, turn 10 degrees right. Yeah. To avoid the traffic. Yeah, gotcha.
November 123, Victor Papa is joining long final runway 31.
Okay, next up, like Australia and the US as well, airports generally are either controlled or uncontrolled in the UK. However, uncontrolled airports have different levels of radio service that's available to you. So in the UK, uncontrolled airports can often have a tower and have people operating a radio service there, but it's not the same as a controlled airport tower where the tower controller would let you into the airspace. They'd have to give you clearance to land, they'd have to give you clearance to take off. In the UK, in an uncontrolled airport, when there is a tower, you've got to be careful because you're not going to get the level of ATC services that you might expect. Now again, because I'm not an expert in this area, I thought I would lean on someone who is. Hello, John.
Hey.
How are you, mate?
Yeah, really good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good. Look, I'm a bit confused. I'm trying to explain to everybody the differences in the UK between the different levels of service that you can get from the tower at airports, but I'm not doing a good job of it. And I thought, can you help me out?
Yeah, it's a bit complicated. So we have tower. If it's call sign tower, that means it's air traffic control. So it's full control. You have to get a clearance in and out. You do what you're told, both on the ground and in the air. If the call sign is information, and they might be in a tower, but they don't have the tower call sign, that means that they control you on the ground, but they don't control you in the air. And then we have air ground. Again, they might be in a tower, but they're not call sign tower. And there's no control. So the pilots are in charge of what they do on the ground and in the air. But in all of the 3 cases, you're obviously going to be taking advice from the air traffic service personnel, be they a controller or a FISO or an air-to-ground operator, and listen to what kind of traffic information they're giving you. So those are the main ones. And we do have some uncontrolled ones as well that don't have a tower at all, and they would be on what's called safety comm. And I suppose that's like a common frequency like you have, I guess, where you just announce to everyone else what you're doing. You can also get director and radar. So at the airfields in controlled airspace, they will have radar or director. Obviously with radar and then going into controlled airspace, it's a bit like a controlled tower. So you just do what you're told to do, basically.
Yeah. Do you ever get confused between them all? Is it just us tourists who come to the UK, or do you sometimes local pilots do the same thing?
It took me a while after getting my license actually to understand, because it is a bit of a minefield. You know, at one place they can control you on the ground, and then another place they can't, and so on. And actually, some of these, to make it even more complicated, and this will sound bizarre, you know, depending on staff workload, they'll sometimes be a bit of a chameleon in a way. They'll sometimes be listed as an info, sometimes as an air to ground, sometimes an approach. And often the only way to find that out is when they reply to you, they'll tell you what service they are.
Hey, thanks for your help, mate. I appreciate that.
No worries, anytime.
Here in Australia, if you're flying to an uncontrolled airport, maybe at night time or maybe when the weather conditions aren't very good and you're flying IFR, a lot of our uncontrolled airports actually have their own instrument approaches. That's very different to the UK, where at the time of recording, and as far as I'm aware, there's only one uncontrolled airport in the UK which has its own dedicated instrument approach. Now that's a place called Sherburn in Elmet, and my friend John, who I just spoke to, he made a really good video about that new instrument approach. I'll link to that from the description in this video. But you do need to call ahead to get permission to fly that instrument approach, and you do actually need to book a slot with the airport before you can fly the instrument approach into Sherburn in Elmet. That is very different to here in Australia, where if you want to fly the approach to an uncontrolled airport, as long as you tell air traffic control what you're doing and coordinate with other aircraft who may be using the circuit at the same time, you don't need prior permission. You can just go ahead and fly it. Prior permission. The UK does like prior permission. Talking of prior permission, it's a terrible segue. Most airports, particularly the ones that I flew in and out of, require you to book an arrival slot. That's prior permission you have to get and a time you have to nominate for when you're going to be getting to the airport. Now, a lot of airports, and again, many of the ones that I flew in and out of as well, also require prior permission for departure. And unless your aircraft is based at the airport you're departing from, in some instances you can't actually depart the airport until the tower is active, even if it's in uncontrolled airspace. And even if the tower is not giving you a specific clearance to depart, they're just giving you airfield information, you still can't leave the airport until someone in that tower gives you that airport information. That actually happened to me when I was flying in the UK out of Duxford, when I was ready to go at 8 o'clock in the morning, but the tower wasn't going to be operational until 10 o'clock that morning. It was a beautiful VFR day. I was fueled and ready to go, but I physically had to wait at the airport for 2 hours just for someone in the tower to give me that airport information and basically not give me permission because it wasn't a clearance, but just, well, I don't even know what it is. They're not telling you can go, but you definitely can't go without someone in the tower not telling you that you can go. Now, it's not all bad. There is one really big benefit of having prior permission to go into an airfield, and that's every time I did that in the UK, I got really good detailed explanations of the procedures, the circuit arrival procedures, any noise abatement procedures, and also the weather conditions and the conditions of the airport itself as well. The downside, of course, though, is that it just takes more time. I mean, aviation here in Australia compared to the UK, the way I think about it is here it's a bit more like a road trip. You know, you can see it's a nice day outside, you can jump in the plane and you can think, well, let's go here, then maybe here, and let's see where we want to go after that. In the UK, it doesn't feel as flexible as that. You have to be a lot more planned in advance. It's less of a road trip and more like a road trip with your parents when they wanted to plan every single stop and which service station you were going to stop at because that one had the best toilets. Now let's talk about the big one. Let's talk about airspace. There is a lot of airspace in the UK, especially around the southeast of England where I was flying. Now, my biggest recommendation, I would say, is get a good electronic flight bag, but more importantly, I would say, is know how to use it. You don't want to be learning your EFB as you're going around some really complex airspace. You obviously can't use it as a primary form of navigation, and check with your instructor on the legalities of how you can use an EFB in the cockpit, but just to be able to use it to plan around airspace. is critically important. You don't want to be doing that on the fly because the UK is small, especially compared to somewhere like Australia. It's small and airspace will creep up on you very, very quickly. Now, there is no chance of flying through London's Class A controlled airspace. At some points, that starts at just 2,400 feet. But there are some control zones around some major airports in the southeast of England that you can fly through if you do have the right clearance from air traffic control. For example, Luton.
November 4 Mike Whiskey, you cleared to enter control airspace initially towards awfully to hold, not above altitude 2,000 feet at VFR, expect to cross by the 25 threshold.
The good thing about places like Luton is they actually have really good VFR packs on their website which give you some pretty explicit instructions of exactly how to fly through their controlled airspace. Jump onto the websites of Luton, Southend was another one that I flew through, and download these packs because it not only gives you like the VFR reporting points that you should plan to go in and out of their airspace through, but it also gives you examples of radio communications you could expect, which you can then practice on the ground beforehand so you know what to expect when you're flying through that airspace. I was honestly expecting it to be a lot more complex and a lot harder, but to be honest, the controllers in the UK were fantastic, and with the right preparation, even though sometimes I was asked to stay outside control zones.
November 774 Mike Whiskey, Roger. Continue on your own navigation. Initially remain outside of control airspace. I'll come back with a clearance for you very shortly.
Or was denied clearance through a control zone entirely.
I'm actually looking to transit across your zone at this altitude, east to west, if able.
November 4 Mike Whiskey, negative. We have arrivals in the lake.
If you plan ahead, if you practice what you're going to say beforehand, and if you're confident on the radio when asking for clearances, in my experience, you're more likely to get it. One huge difference and a massive advantage that the UK had over Australia are facilities that you get at the airports themselves. Unlike in Australia, where our airport facilities generally include a toilet and some spiders in that toilet, in the UK they really seem to encourage aviators, and there's this real social aspect and community feel of people coming to the airport just to gather there and enjoy aviation. When I was flying through the UK, I did notice some what looked like abandoned airports, some disused airfields. It was really sad to see these hotspots of aviation no longer being used. So if you do have an airport near you, even if you're not a pilot, maybe you've got young kids, take them along to the airports, maybe at the weekends for an hour or so, just to go and watch the planes and have a great day of aviation, but also support some of these local facilities, because without the support of people like you and me, some of these might not exist in the future, and I certainly want to do everything I can to try and prevent that from happening. As I mentioned before, flying into London's Class A airspace, it's basically impossible, and air traffic control will warn you if you get too close to the boundary, which is exactly what happened to me on this flight when I strayed a little bit too close to Heathrow's airspace, and, well, click on the video and you can see what happens next.